As far as I'm concerned, the most important provision in an artist management agreement by far is the clause that outlines what are known as post-term commissions. Post-term commissions basically describe the duration to which you will continue to pay your manager his or her commission, even when he or she is no longer your manager. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking the same thing that Kelly Clarkson is thinking, which is, if you are no longer my manager, you are no longer entitled to receive a percentage of my money. To which somebody like me would respond, I am if the judge says I am. And therein lies the problem with a verbal management agreement.
There's someone you should know.
Hey everybody, welcome to the BOMB Podcast. BOMB stands for Business of Music Bootcamp, which means that this is the place where we will drill down on the business and legal aspects of the music industry. Everything from copyrights and contracts to policies and practices. Whatever it takes to educate and empower you with the knowledge you need to make informed decisions about how to protect yourself and your music is what you'll find on the BOMB. I'm your host, Professor Butler, and as a retired entertainment attorney, former record label executive, music law professor, and college administrator, I have counseled thousands of artists and musicians on the intricacies of the music business. Now it's your turn.
The information in this podcast is not intended, nor should it be construed as legal advice. If you have questions of a legal nature, we strongly recommend that you contact an attorney in your local jurisdiction who specializes in music and/or entertainment law. For guidance, check out our website at professorbutler.com and sign up to receive a free resource on how to find the right lawyer for you. And now, your host of the BOMB Podcast, Professor Butler.
Hey everybody, welcome to the BOMB Podcast, season number 2, episode lucky number 1. I'm your host, Professor Butler, and I know you're probably wondering, where in the heck has she been? Well, that's because it's been 4 months since I released a new episode, and trust me, it has been just as painful for me as it has been for you. Why? Because I love doing this show. I love the BOMB Podcast. I love my audience, and I really hated being offline for such an extended period of time. But as you well know, life in the midst of a global pandemic is more unpredictable than ever. So I had to take a break to take care of some business as well as to take care of myself in order to make sure that I was and am able to bring you my best. Because look, y'all, I'm not doing this for money, okay? I'm not getting paid. I don't have any advertisers. I don't have any sponsors yet. I would accept a decent sponsor. But besides that, this is a labor of love for me. So thank you so much. Thank you for sticking with me, hanging in there, and supporting the BOMB Podcast. All right, let's get down to business. In today's episode, we will continue to explore the issues involved in the lawsuit between Kelly Clarkson and her ex-manager / ex-husband, Brandon Blackstock, and Starstruck Management Group. In last season's episode 12, which was part 1 of this story, I explored the elements of a binding contract using Kelly Clarkson's verbal management agreement with Starstruck as a backdrop. To refresh your memory, Kelly Clarkson was being managed by Starstruck Management's group's Narvel Blackstock, which is her father-in-law's company. Narvel introduced Kelly to his son in 2006. Couple got married 2013. Brandon, the son, who also managed Rascal Flatts and Blake Shelton, took over as Kelly's manager. All right. Unfortunately, after only 7 years of marriage, Clarkson filed for divorce in June of 2020 and subsequently stopped paying commissions to her management company / husband, which is why they filed a lawsuit and took her to court. The lawsuit filed by Starstruck alleges that Clarkson paid the firm $1.9 million in 2020, owes them another $1.4 million, and will likely be owed another $5.4 million by the end of 2020 in estimated commissions. The issue I covered in detail in episode 12 was that the agreement between Clarkson and Nashville-based Starstruck was not in writing. That's right. In 2007, Kelly Clarkson and Starstruck Management entered into a verbal artist management agreement. And in a nutshell, not only did I cover the elements of a valid contract, written or not, which include offer, acceptance, and consideration, I talked about the kinds of contracts that must be in writing in order to be valid under the statute of frauds. And if any of that sounds foreign to you, please go back, check out episode 12 from season 1 for full details. Moving onward, now that we have established that a verbal agreement can be just as valid as a written agreement, I want to move into the next issue that the lawsuit raised, which is the commission structure of an artist management agreement and the reason why Kelly Clarkson may still owe commissions to a manager that she is no longer working with or is married to. In general, there are all sorts of language that can be negotiated as part of an artist management or personal management, words are interchangeable, agreement. Everything from the term or the length of the agreement and the services or the scope of what the agreement covers, as well as the amount of the commission and the definition of and extent of commissionable activities. But as far as I am concerned, the most important provision in an artist management agreement by far is the clause that outlines what are known as post-term commissions. Post-term commissions basically describe the duration to which you will continue to pay your manager his or her commission, even when he or she is no longer your manager. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking the same thing that Kelly Clarkson is thinking, which is, if you are no longer my manager, you are no longer entitled to receive a percentage of my money. To which somebody like me would respond, I am if the judge says I am. And therein lies the problem with a verbal management agreement. No one ever discusses the subject of post-term commissions verbally. And although they can be easily dealt with in one paragraph, and if you're not careful, one word, that's only when we're referring to a writing. Without a written contract, when it's up to the judge to discern the certain indefinite terms of the agreement, the post-term will likely be whatever is customary practice in the applicable industry, in this case, the music industry. More on that in a moment. Before we dive into the specifics of post-term commissions, let's talk about why you have a manager in the first place. One question I always get a lot, especially from new or up-and-coming artists, is, when do I need a manager? And my answer to that question is always the same. You don't need a manager until you have something to manage. If you're just sitting around writing songs and recording in your parents' basement and doing a coffee shop show here and there, you really should be managing yourself. But if you have so much going on that it becomes virtually impossible for you to continue to be artistic and to make your music, and you're starting to generate income from multiple sources, then it may be time to consider working with an artist manager. That's what happened to Kelly Clarkson. She rose to fame in 2002 after winning the first season of American Idol, which earned her a record deal with RCA Records. She was writing, recording, touring, making appearances, and doing far too much to be expected to manage herself. And although it may sound odd that she would enter into a verbal management agreement, it's actually quite the common practice. Artists and managers often start working together on the strength of a handshake. Now, in the beginning especially, there's not a lot of money being made, so the risk is relatively low. However, once those checks start coming in, it's a good idea to memorialize the deal on paper, not just so you know each person's legal obligation, but so you know what will happen when or if you two decide to break up or part ways. Because whether the agreement is written and just left out a few details, or the agreement is verbal and the parties just don't agree on the details, one way or the other, a judge will be the one to fill in the blanks. In Kelly Clarkson's case, the biggest missing detail is post-term commissions. So let me explain to you how this works. Let's say you are handling your own career, and after a while, you begin to get so busy that you can no longer manage your own affairs effectively. Basically, you've been on the grind for a period of years, all on your own. Now you're finally starting to catch fire. That's great. That's what you've always wanted. All of a sudden, one day, out of the blue, you're on fire, and you are contacted on Instagram by an artist manager who is interested in working with you. Now, you all listened to my first episode on how not to get scammed. So you know how I feel about people reaching out to you on Instagram. And because of that, you also know that you should ask around about that person. You should check their references. You should make sure they are who they say they are and that they can do what they say they can do. And how do you know they can do what they say they can do? It's because they've done it before and you've checked, you've verified it, you've confirmed it. They have a track record. They have a good reputation for representing up and coming young artists. They are excited about working with you, and they have plenty of resources and contacts at their disposal. Okay, great. So what's the first question? Do you need a written management agreement? The answer we've already discussed, it depends. If you decide up front that the two of you will be working together for a year or more, then the answer is yes, you need a written agreement because, according to the statute of frauds, any agreement that cannot be performed within a year must be in writing to be valid. If, however, you decide to try each other out for a few months, then no, you don't necessarily need a writing. A verbal agreement will suffice. However, you still need enough certain and definite terms, as well as the exchange of promises or consideration in order to form a valid verbal agreement. You need to discuss what the manager will do for you in exchange for what percentage of your earnings the manager will receive. Generally, the manager will agree to advise, counsel, and guide your career. They'll help you make decisions like what kind of deals to sign or which gigs to take, who to work with, what clothes to wear, how to wear your hair, how much you should be getting paid, which producers you want to work with, etc., etc., etc. Basically, all of the relevant decisions involving your career. And what do you promise them in exchange for all this advice and information? In exchange, you will agree to pay the manager a commission in the amount of somewhere between 10 and 20%. The typical, I don't like to say standard, the typical commission being around 15% of your gross earnings. Now don't forget, gross means off the top before expenses, something you might want to have your lawyer negotiate. You have to determine what is included in the gross. And a promise to advise and counsel in exchange for a promise to pay commissions, as long as the parties want to continue working together, is enough to form a valid verbal agreement. So, let's say you start working with this manager, right? Based all on a handshake. And all of a sudden you blow up. I mean, you reach almost superstar status. You become a household name. You're winning awards. You're starring in movies. You even get your picture on the front of a soda can and a cereal box. You are huge. And just as you are reaching the pinnacle of your career, you and your manager decide to part ways. Either the agreement expires and you just decide not to re-up. You might be tired of each other and just want to move on. Or in Kelly Clarkson's case, you get a divorce. Whatever the circumstances, you and your manager decide to break up. Now, from the artist's perspective, you're probably thinking that because you and your ex-manager have parted ways, that you can stop paying commissions. That makes sense, right? After all, they aren't working for you anymore, right? I mean, who continues to get paid even after they are fired, for goodness sakes? The answer is your ex-manager does. That's who. And here's why. If you were writing songs recording in your parents' basement and singing in coffee shops when you met your manager? And 5 years later, you were on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine? It's true, you may be an exceptional talent, but your manager's position will be that no one would have ever seen or heard that exceptional talent had it not been for them and their exceptional representation of you. And think about it. If your manager gets you a record deal in year 5 of a 5-year contract, let's say, and you decide to fire them, don't they deserve to get paid something on the music you recorded? Even if those records are released after you part ways? What if they get you a job hosting a TV show and it turns out to be a long-running show, Kelly Clarkson? Shouldn't they get something for getting you that deal in the first place? Well, herein lies the issue. The artist will want the commissions to stop as soon as the relationship ends. The manager, and I know that there are several managers out there who listen to the Bomb podcast, so I like to keep an even keel. The manager will want to continue to receive commissions on any proceeds generated as a result of any deals they secured for you during the term while they were still your manager, which could be problematic. Let's say if your manager got you a record deal in 2000, you all break up or cut ties in 2005, but you're still making records with the same label in 2020. Should you still be paying commissions 15 years after the fact? 15 years after they are no longer your manager? Well, like everything else in the music business, it depends. It depends on what your manager did for you while they were working for you. Now, if they advised you and counseled you, it makes sense that once they are no longer your manager, that advice will end and therefore the commission should end. But what if they got you a record deal or a publishing deal or a TV show during the term that continues long after the term? Then it's probably reasonable, right, for them to continue to receive commissions on the records made pursuant to that record deal after the term of the agreement has ended. But the real question here is not whether they are entitled to something, because in all fairness, we're going to be fair now. Depending on what they did for you, they probably are. The real question becomes, how much of a commission should they continue to receive? And for how long should they continue to receive it? These are referred to as post-term commissions because they are paid to the manager post or after the term. So, check this out. There are probably hundreds of old, and I mean old artist management agreements floating around on the internet that you should not be using, that anybody that you're working with as a manager should not be using. And all those old artist management agreements floating around on the internet do not indicate how much of a commission the manager should get post-term, nor do they say for how long the manager should receive said commissions. Many of them just say that the artist agrees to pay managers agreed upon commission before and after the term. That's it. And I tell my students all the time, I tell them some of the scariest words in a contract are not the 15, 17, 20 letter words, if there is such a thing as a 20 letter word. The scariest words in a contract are the 3, 4, 5 letter words like but and if, or, and in this case, after. Because the word after means exactly what it says. After, for as long as after lasts. And to make matters worse, there's still some contracts out there that will come right out and say that the manager is owed their full commission in perpetuity, which means forever. Now, don't panic, because I've heard this advice given in a couple of different ways. I don't want you to be afraid of the word in perpetuity. There are some agreements in the music industry, in the film industry, that are perpetual out of necessity. If you license the use of one of your songs or one of your masters for me to use on my compilation album, that license by necessity must be perpetual. Why? Because I can't have you 10, 20, 50 years later asking me to remove your song from my album, right? That don't make sense. So the license has to be perpetual. Once your song is on my album, it's on my album forever. That makes sense. So I don't want you to be afraid of the word. However, I do want you to be afraid of the word when you see it in a personal or an artist management agreement. That's when you should be afraid, and not just a little afraid. I mean, very afraid. The one word you should never agree to anywhere in any management agreement are the words in perpetuity. Why? Because under no circumstances should you be paying your ex-manager commissions forever. I don't care what they did for you. I don't care if you are still making records from the same record deal they helped you get 20, 30, 50 years later, right? Once your agreement has been terminated, it is totally unreasonable for them to expect to receive commissions on those records in perpetuity. The entire concept, as far as I'm concerned, is egregious, unfair, and completely unconscionable. Or, as District Attorney Barber on Perry Mason says, it's incompetent, irrelevant, and immaterial. And one more thing. If your manager does ask you to sign one of those old contracts they found on the internet, or even a new contract that they may have had written by their lawyer, and that contract includes perpetual commissions, you need to run for the hills. You really do. Why? Because like I just said, it's egregious. And it's egregious for two reasons and in two different ways. Number one, if they know what in perpetuity means, they're probably too crooked to work with, right? They're too shady. They're too shisty. If they know what the word means and they know that they are wanting to get and take your commissions for the rest of your life. But let's say they don't know what in perpetuity means. They just pulled the contract off the internet. Okay. If that's the case, you need to run anyway. Why? Because they're too stupid to work with, right? You don't want to work with somebody that don't even know the terms of their own contract that they're giving to you. Yeah, I said it. Either way, either they're a crook or they're stupid. Either way, you need to find another manager. All right, that's enough of my rant. With all that said, if we believe the manager is entitled to some commissions after the contract ends, but we don't want to have to pay our manager or our former manager commissions until the end of all time, where do we draw the line? We draw the line with a sunset clause. A sunset clause is exactly what it sounds like. Whatever you are paying your manager during the term will sunset, go down, or be reduced after the term until they are eventually gone altogether. The sunset clause will likely apply to those deals that the manager helped you to secure during the term that lasts beyond the term. So, for example, a 5-year record deal that you signed in the last year of your management agreement is going to last for at least 5 years after you and the manager are no longer together. Not only that, but remember, you're going to be recording during that record deal, and the albums you recorded and released a part of that record deal are basically going to be on the market and selling forever, especially with streaming and new emerging formats. Now, that's going to be the manager's argument. I got you the record deal. You recorded an album while you had that record deal, and that album is still selling 50 years later, which means I should be getting commissions 50 years later. So pay very, very, very close attention to what you'll be required to pay commissions on. The problem, folks, is most of you don't hire a lawyer until after you hire a manager. And you know how I feel about that. The way I feel about it, a lawyer is the first person you should get to know. Even if you don't hire them, even if you don't put them on retainer, you should be getting to know lawyers today so that it's not an emergency, right? When somebody puts an offer in front of you, right? The first person you should hire, or at least have a relationship with, is your lawyer, because you want your lawyer to review your agreement with your manager. And you want your lawyer to negotiate every single commissionable item so that all parties are clear as to what commissions are being paid on. Another example, what if your manager introduced you to the record company in the last year of your agreement, right? They just introduced you, but y'all never got to the table. Y'all never made the deal. But later, after you break up with the manager, you go ahead and sign with that same record label that the manager introduced you to. So let me say that again. Manager introduces you to RCA Records in June. Y'all break up in July, right? So now he's not your manager anymore. But in October, you go ahead and sign a deal with RCA Records. All right. Your manager is going to want to receive commissions on that deal as well. And that, I got to be honest, is not completely unreasonable if you sign that deal within a few months after the term, right? Now, if you sign with RCA a year later, right, it could have been your new manager that facilitated that deal. But if it's like 2-3 months after your manager introduced them to you, then maybe. The whole point is that's something that you will need to negotiate as well. So let's say that you agree your former manager should get paid on that record deal they help you get toward the end of the term. How much money should they receive and for how long should they receive it? You can't very well pay your old manager 15% post-term. Why? Because that won't leave you enough money to pay a new manager. Or let's say if you do go ahead and get a new manager, you paying them both 15%, that's 30% of your income. If that deal that they secured for you was at the end of the term, your ex-manager may want their full term for a couple of years. You never know. So it's all in what you negotiate. And once again, I don't like using the word standard, but when it comes to sunset clauses, there is definitely no standard. The duration of the sunset clause is whatever you and your lawyer and your manager's lawyer agree to. The duration, for example, could be post-term equal to the term. I usually like those kind, which means that if the term is 3 years, then the post-term will be 3 years. Why? We weren't together that long, so maybe you shouldn't be getting commissions for that long afterwards. So if the term is 3 years and the post-term is 3 years or maybe double the term at most, in those 3 years, the ex-manager would get full commission for 1 year post-term, then half of that year 2, and then half of that half year 3. So basically 15% 1 year after they're no longer your manager, 7.5% in the second year after they're no longer your manager, maybe 3% in the third year after which they're no longer your manager, and then finally the commissions will stop. Or in the immediate post-term, instead of them getting full commission, as soon as they are no longer your manager, they immediately only get half of their commission for the first year, half of that the second year, half of that half of the third year, et cetera, et cetera. What I'm saying is you can structure a sunset clause any way you want. But whatever you do, you must include it in your written agreement. You must have a lawyer negotiate it for you, or else you will end up in the same situation as Kelly Clarkson. Remember, Kelly and her manager didn't have a written agreement at all. Therefore, they, in all likelihood, never discussed post-term commissions. In that lawsuit, which I am diligently following and will update you on in another episode, a judge is the one that's going to have to determine several things. Because remember, they weren't written down. And Kelly and her ex don't agree on what the terms are. So the judge is going to have to figure it out. So the judge is going to have to determine, number one, whether post-term commissions are warranted in the first place. Meaning, can Kelly's husband get post-term commissions, period? Number two, what is commissionable during the post-term? Meaning, let's say post-term commissions are warranted on what activities? Is it the deal you got me? Is it on records recorded during the deal? Is it the TV show you got me? What is commissionable? Number three, for how long those commissions will last. Meaning, if we were together 7 years, right? Does that mean I should get commissions for 7 years after we're no longer together? Maybe it's a more fair number, like maybe 3 to 5 years after we're no longer together. So the judge has to determine the duration of the post-term commissions, but most importantly, number 4, the judge has to determine the amount of those commissions. And how does the judge determine how much you're going to get? Well, they'll look at several things like whether the future sales are the result of the old manager's past efforts versus the new manager's efforts. Maybe how much you're making, maybe how much the manager was involved in that deal, all sorts of things. And remember this, if you get a new manager, you might want to make sure that they don't get paid on anything either generated by the old manager, which could be tricky. That could be tricky. Or on contracts where the old manager is still getting paid. Now that's somewhat fair. But if you recorded an album during the term of your last manager, you've got a new manager now, and that album goes platinum because of the new manager's efforts. Shouldn't the new manager get some of those proceeds, even though the deal was generated by your old manager? See how confusing this can be? See why you need a lawyer? Right? You want to make sure that you're not paying twice no matter what you do, or double dipping on the same income, meaning paying 2 managers on the same income that your work generates. So basically, that was a long story, I know. But what have we learned today? And can you keep what's happening to Kelly Clarkson from happening to you? And the answer is yes. First of all, what we learned is that a handshake or a verbal agreement might be okay when you're first starting out and getting to know each other. Although I prefer that you spend the time to get to know each other before you enter into an agreement, but that's just me. But once you start generating income, you'll want to write things down. Number 2, a written agreement outlining the certain and definite terms is highly recommended. And remember what I've told you several times. A written agreement does not have to be some 15, 20-page long contract filled with legalese. It can be written in plain language on the back of a paper towel for all I care, so long as it memorializes the agreement between the parties. You say what you're going to do, they say what they're going to do, you say how much you're going to pay, and then you sign it. That's your contract. At least start with that before you're able to then move forward to a lawyer. Because remember, you may not be able to negotiate that sunset clause on your own. Number 3, always have a lawyer on deck to review and negotiate your management agreement, especially post-term commissions in the form of a sunset clause. Why? That sunset clause is going to spell out what's commissionable, how much the post-term will be, and how long the money is owed. 4, always avoid the words in perpetuity in a management agreement. That doesn't mean that you have to be afraid of those words in every contract, but in a management agreement in particular, it's going to refer to the fact that you will be paying commissions to your ex-manager for the rest of your life. So if you see it, run. And finally, whatever you don't talk about in your verbal agreement, or whatever you don't write down in your written agreement, is going to end up in the hands of a judge. And the judge will have no choice but to use current industry standards and practices to determine your fate. Right now, the current industry practice really is a sunset clause, but like I said, there's no standard as to how long that sunset clause should last. So if you take the time to write it down, you'll be able to avoid a decision by a judge that may or may not be in your favor. That's how you protect yourself and your music. You write it down. Whew. All right, that is it for this week. Oh, honey, but there is more to this Kelly Clarkson story. Trust me, I'll be bringing that to you in the next few weeks because she has a response, right? She has a response to the management company's lawsuit. That you most definitely you need to tune in for. But in the meantime, Stay tuned for another exciting episode of the Bomb Podcast. I will see you next time. Take care. Thanks for joining me on the Bomb Podcast. If you were educated, empowered, or inspired by what you heard, please subscribe today to be the first to receive the latest episode. And don't forget, post a review, tell a friend, follow me on social media, and join my tribe at ProfessorButler.com.